Right from the beginning, Abhedananda had put his heart and soul to the Vedanta work, holding regular classes at the Vedanta Society and giving public lectures on Sundays to an audience that went on steadily increasing. He lectured also once every week in Montclair, New Jersey, and there were earnest calls for classes that came from Brooklyn and other places, and he was unable to undertake them for want of time. During the month of January 1897, he gave 12 lectures, drawing large and intelligent audiences. Considering the importance and the newness of the subjects of teaching to the majority of them, several of his lectures were by special request repeated even a third and fourth time in order to enable them to have a clear comprehension of the principles involved. Besides these, he opened Gita classes in New York and Brooklyn and aroused so much interest that not a few of his students began learning the Sanskrit language with a view to gain a first-hand knowledge of the Gita and also of other ancient Hindu scriptures yet untranslated. It might be mentioned here that over and above his erudition in Sanskrit literature and philosophy, Swami Abhedananda's careful studies in Western science and philosophy gave him an additional advantage in demonstrating the fact that Vedanta was much in harmony with some of the most advanced ideas of modern science. By this way, he created respect for his teachings and enlisted such adherents as would not be convinced unless shown that Huxley or Tyndall or Spencer or Kant agreed in substance with a particular view advanced by Vedanta. He opened, moreover, regular classes on yoga and meditation, which were filled with earnest students who began to learn and practice pranayama with great zeal and devotion. During this first phase of his work, Abhedananda met many representative thinkers in the world of art and science and religion, both in private life and in social gatherings, and by his unfailing courtesy and readiness in answering questions, he awakened their friendly interest in his mission and teachings. One of the most liberal and enlightened of the New York clergymen even went so far as to distribute his lecture programs among his congregation, advising them to go and listen to his teachings. This was somewhat unthinkable during the time of Swami Vivekananda, to whom they were more or less hostile. Numerous invitations to lecture in clubs came, and Abhedananda accepted as many as he possibly could. Thus, before the end of February, he had spoken before the 20th Century Club and the Metaphysical Club of Brooklyn and the Twilight Club of New York. The New York Tribune of March 6, 1897, in the course of reporting his lecture and his work, wrote, "His face is fine chiseled and with universal intellectual strength, shows the singular dignity, gentleness, and repose of his people. His hands are no less individual and expressive of high character. As a speaker, Swami Abhedananda is self-contained and attractive, and his lectures are clean, original explanations of philosophic subjects related to practical living. His command of English is as perfect as his pronunciation, which rarely is slip in accent, which adds to the charm of a pleasing delivery. To an occasional attendant, the growth of interest was unmistakable in steadily increasing audiences of intelligent people, many of them members of Orthodox churches, with a representation of well-known persons in public life. With the month of April, the present session of work in New York came to an end. In all, it is gathered from the records that Swami Abhedananda had delivered 86 lectures at Mott Memorial Hall alone. As the foregoing chapters will show, he made a splendid record of arduous work, well done, and secured the last esteem of all who had come within the sphere of his influence. Several of the best journals of the state published throughout appreciative accounts of his teaching in personally, such as The Sun, the New York Tribune, the Literary Digest, and the Times. On the other hand, the occasional criticism in religious journals only show the deep influence that Vedanta was making for itself in church circles, as well as among liberal thinkers, and the recognition it was forcing from Western theologians. Thus, the untiring labors of Swami Abhedananda, following upon those of his predecessor, Swami Vivekananda, resulted within a short period in the firm establishment of the Vedanta as well as the society in New York. The Vedanta had also incorporated duly under the laws of the state. In this connection, in the Critic of March 19th, 1898, they wrote, "The Vedanta Society published considerable literature of their philosophy after it became a regular incorporated body under the leadership of Swami Abhedananda. Pamphlets and books published by the Society covered a wide range of subjects, including American lectures and translations from Indian classics and English magazines on the subjects published in India. It may be noted here that immediately after its incorporation, a booklet entitled The Aims and Objects of Vedanta Society was published, from which we quote the following lines. The main objects of the Vedanta Society are to explain through logic and reason the spiritual laws that govern our lives, to establish the universal religion, which underlies the various sects and creeds of all the so-called special religions." Thus began the reorganization of the Society under the presidency of Francis H. Leggett. Among the subsequent office bearers or honorary members of the Society, we find such names as Herschel Parker of Columbia University, Dr. Newton, and Professor Landman and Corson, and many other distinguished intellectuals of the time. The activities of the Society spread so much that by 1898 there were 5 centers, one in Brooklyn, 2 in California, 1 in Washington, and 1 in New York for teaching Vedanta in America. Even the children began to learn Vedanta, and the children's class of the Vedanta Society was very successful. In this connection, the New York Herald of March 4th, 1900 published a lengthy report showing some of the New York juvenile Vedantists, along with Swami Abhedananda. We quote the following lines from the report. Not least among the extraordinary things of these times is the realization that India is sending missionaries of the Hindu religion into the very core and heart of our Western civilization. Here in New York, such monks have banded together a society for the propagation of their philosophy, which is taking such deep root and spreading so rapidly that children in this city are being received and trained in the faith of Brahman and are sent every week to sit at the feet of the Eastern Mahatma to learn wisdom and grace. Every Saturday afternoon, a class of young boys and girls gathers together in the room of the Vedanta Society on 55th Street to speak an hour or so with Swami Abhedananda and drink in the teachings of the Hindu philosophy, which is expounded to them in a most fascinating way. He would read before the children stories from the Hitopadesha, chiefly, and he also discussed the life and teachings of Jesus. This was a singular achievement, no doubt. It was therefore not for nothing that the Evening Mail of New York wrote, Swami Abhedananda is undoubtedly the most interesting part of Vedanta. Here is an interesting account as given by the Evening Mail of how Abhedananda conducted his services at the meeting. At the appointed hour, you see a man of middle height, clad in a long belted tunic of reddish purple, enter in steady manner and seat himself to a high-backed chair at the front of the stage. After the audience has become thoroughly quiet, he rises, stands looking upward a moment, and begins reciting in resonant Sanskrit an invocation to the universal God. The words, which are sung rather than spoken, are delightfully musical and good to listen to, though not one of them be understood. The Swami then repeats the invocation in English. A man of oriental tact and grace, with a knack for meeting people's natural curiosity about the most inconclusive and ambitious of all philosophies, the Swami never treads upon anyone's theological corns. Beginning his lecture straight away after the invocation, he talks for a full hour extemporaneously. At the close of the discourse, he announces that he will answer questions concerning it which are passed up in writing while the contribution box goes around. And these questions, when they were not too vague or foolish for comprehension, he does patiently and luminously answer. Then he calls upon the audience to rise and deliver a benediction in Sanskrit, which also he translates in English. His discourses are extremely clever elucidation of the deepest Indian philosophy. And about the character of the society, the same paper wrote, "The Vedanta Society of New York has some of the characteristics of a club. The members pay $25 down to become life members. For this, they get class instruction in yoga or the path toward the eternal goal in the house where the Swami lives. They get the privilege of daily meditation under the Swami's guidance. They also get the privilege of reading Vedanta books at the headquarters." Eventually, the work of the society grew until it was found desirable to bring Swami Nirmalananda, a young man and disciple of Vivekananda from India, to assist Abhedananda in his work. And since then, the propagation of Vedanta went on with increasing activity. Later on, he was assisted in his work by Swami Turiyananda, a brother disciple who went to America along with Swami Vivekananda in 1899. How active was Swami Abhedananda in preaching the gospel of Vedanta in the United States, almost from the very beginning of his arrival there, would be evident from the following account as incorporated in the original edition of the Vivekananda Biography, published in 1915, and writing about the early activities of Abhedananda, the authors state. The season ended. Swami Abhedananda went to Washington for a rest, but so interested became the people to hear about Vedanta that he gave several addresses there in parlors and studios, and 2 public lectures, one in the People's Church and the other in the Institute of Practical Christianity. It was introduced to President McKinley and was kindly received, with friendly inquiries about himself and his country. He also met the Honorable John Bodie, the governor of Alaska, and was the guest of Elmer Gates, the celebrated scientist and psychologist. He next went to Boston and lectured in the Free Religious Association of America. Through the kindness of Professor James and Royce, the Swami had the privilege of being present at the class lectures in philosophy of Harvard University. Professor William James, at the end of his class lectures, invited the students to hear the Swami's lecture the following day and suggested to him that the subject be unity in variety. Professor James, as also Professor Luhmann, the great Sanskrit scholar, were present at the lecture, which was received with marked attention and favor. The Swami received during his stay many friendly attentions from professors at Harvard and was the guest of several in their homes. Then he spent some days in Medford, Newton Highlands, and Salem, and lectured in those places. After returning to New York, he went to Montclair, and on invitation from the official board of the Unity Church, he conducted the Sunday service, addressed the congregation on the true basis of morality. This was one of Abhedananda's most famous lectures during the period, to the great satisfaction of all. From there, he went to various places and lectured and taught nearly all of them till the end of July. The next month, he spent at Eliot, Maine, where he discoursed on Vedanta at the sessions of the Mulsafat School for the Comparative Study of Religion. After 4 weeks' work at Green Acre, the Swami was finally able to enjoy a well-earned rest at the White Mountains in New Hampshire, and later at the country homes of his friends in the Catskill Mountains. He was invited to stop at Newport in Rhode Island, and on the way, the Reverend R. Heber Newton was one of the most liberal and highly esteemed Episcopal clergymen, entertained the Swami at his country residence in Long Island, where he gave an informal talk on the Hindu view of Jesus. The New York work began in November in a longer and better hall, situated in a more central position, and continued throughout, except for the Christmas and New Year holidays, making itself felt more and more as a power for good. There is no need of repeating the similar course of teaching work carried out by the Swami with renewed vigor as in the preceding year, but with an added experience of American life and its spiritual needs and difficulties. On the occasion of the meeting of the Vedanta Society on March 31st, 1899, there was a large attendance who listened with delight to the account of life in India given by Mrs. Bull, who had just returned to America after a year's stay in India. On Easter Sunday, Swami Abhedananda initiated 4 brahmacharyans. During the summer, he left New York to visit Worcester, Boston, Cambridge, and other New England points, and met many able and influential persons. Among others, there were Mr. Edison, the great inventor, Joseph Jefferson, the famous actor, William Dean Howells, the novelist, and professors in Cornell and Yale and other universities. Before leaving New York, the Swami had addressed the Sanskrit classes at Columbia College of the city, and also one of the best social and literary clubs, Barnard, giving in each an account of the religious ideas of the Hindus. The citizens of Worcester, after hearing him twice, urged him to give a course of lectures. This was not possible owing to engagements elsewhere. On 25th April, he lectured on the Vedanta philosophy before the North Shore Club at Lynn, a club composed of cultivated women. The next day, he spoke in Waltham, a noted club. On the 27th, he lectured in Cambridge before the Episcopal Theological School. And on the 30th April, before the Cambridge Conference, he spoke on religious ideas in ancient India. Professor William James and other eminent members of Cambridge, as well as ministers of churches, were among the audience. He gave many lectures in the vicinity of Boston throughout May. These summer tours of the Swami played an important part in disseminating Vedanta teachings in widely separated sections of the country. So finished the report. Thus one finds that the seed sown by Swami Vivekananda on American soil went on ever growing vigorously as days passed, striking other roots deep down into the heart of the nation. In these 6 years since the advent of Vivekananda in the New World in 1893, one sees the growing influence of the Gospels of Vedanta and the other Oriental philosophies in America, in the subjects comprised in courses and lectures, in sermons preached at some of the best-known churches, in the publication of an increasing number of metaphysical and philosophical magazines, and in the rise of the Vedanta societies, all setting forth the principles and practices of Vedanta under many names and in various ways. And the most prominent of these names were that of one about whom we are discussing. And the satisfaction of Vivekananda knew no bounds when he personally witnessed the efforts of his beloved brother-disciple Abhedananda during the time he visited America for the last time. It was in September 1899 that Swami Vivekananda, accompanied by Swami Turiyananda, arrived in New York en route to London. Swami Abhedananda, who had been away from the city on a lecturing tour at the time of Vivekananda's arrival, was soon wired by him to come and meet him in order to report concerning the New York work. Swami Vivekananda was then staying at the country home of Mr. and Mrs. Leggett, which was situated about 150 miles from New York. It might be mentioned here that this second visit of Vivekananda was more on account of health than to undertake any public work. Abhedananda stayed with Vivekananda for 10 days, and it was with great satisfaction that Vivekananda learned from Abhedananda that the Vedanta Society had now acquired permanent quarters. It was during this time that Vivekananda is reported to have made this remark to his brother disciple: "Thrice I knocked at the door of New York, but it did not respond. I am glad that you have established permanent headquarters. This is the first time I have found our own house in New York." The remark itself is significant. It is a clear testimony to the achievements of the young preacher. He then insisted Swami Abhedananda to stay in America at least for 10 years, saying, "I leave the work entirely to you. I have brought Turiyananda from India, and henceforth he will assist you in your work here." Later on, Swami Turiyananda was in charge of the Vedanta movement in California, where he did some excellent work. Vivekananda left America towards the end of July 1900. The extent of his activities during the early stage of Abhedananda's preaching in America will be realized from the following program of his Sunday afternoon lectures from January to April, where he spoke once a week on various themes such as religion for the 20th century, the science of breathing, how a sinner reaches perfection, religion of Jesus and ethics of Vedanta, evolution and immortality, the word of the Son of God and the cross in ancient India, what is Vedanta, and many others. The initial success achieved by Swami Abhedananda, it should be pointed out here, was due to Catholicity of his mind, which ultimately enabled him to win the heart of the American people. The following instance bears an ample testimony to it. He observed in a true Christian style Christmas in 1899, and the New York Herald on 25th December, writing under the caption, "Hindu Santa Claus of Vedanta Society," reports, "Happy indeed were the children who went last evening to the Christmas celebration of the Hindu Swami Abhedananda, who celebrates the festivals of all religions. Although he teaches that the being who was born in Bethlehem 19 centuries ago was only one of the Christs, the Swami always has a Christmas tree and distributes presents. He teaches that the first incarnation of the Supreme Being was that of Krishna, who was born 14 centuries before the Christian era. Clad in a long, clinging robe of red, the Swami sat last evening in the back parlor of the house at 146 East 55th Street, where the Vedanta Society, of which he is the head and front, has its headquarters. The Swami spoke in a low conversational tone, sitting close to the Christmas tree, which glowed and plothered by means of 50 candles, and he explained in belief that means of classic stories is which he used, and they had their origin far back in the days of Vedanta, and before our ancestors began wandering for the Asiatic plateaus. Above the Christmas tree was a reproduction of Hoffman's portrait of Christ. Everywhere he spoke on the philosophical thought and the fundamental principle of religion in India, as explained in Vedanta. At one place, for instance, comparing the teachings of Christ with that of Vedanta, Swami Abhedananda said in the course of his lecture before an enlightening gathering, "Vedanta teaches the truths which Christ taught and brings light to dispel the darkness of ages and to make clear the real spirit of his teachings. It is not built around any particular personality. It does not depend on any particular book, but embraces all the scriptures of the world. Going beyond toleration and brotherhood, it recognizes God in every soul and God immanent in all nature. It teaches how we can realize the true meaning of Christ's saying, I and my Father are one. With the dawn of the new century, Swami Abhedananda resumed the work in New York with right earnest. The classes were held and public lectures were delivered on Sundays as usual. The speeches and writings made such a profound influence upon the minds of the American people that he was frequently invited to speak before societies and churches, associations and clubs, as well as universities. We gather from the pages of his own diary that during the session of 1901, Abhedananda spoke on invitation at the following places: the Council of Jewish Women in a synagogue, on the festivities of the ancient Hebrews, the Cremation Society, Spiritualistic Society, Free Religious Association of America, Brooklyn Institute of Arts and Sciences, and many others, such as universities at Harvard and Berkeley and Columbia. As the years passed, the audience grew in number everywhere. For instance, his speech at the spiritualist camp in Chesterfield drew as many as 10,000 people. According to the report in the Anderson Daily Bulletin, which states, "It was a record breaker, the biggest day ever known in Camp Chesterfield." The speech which Abhedananda delivered before such a vast concourse of intelligent people was hailed as an able and scholarly presentation of the religion of the Orient. His third lecture at the spiritualist camp was on reincarnation, and he put up a strong argument in support of the theory of reincarnation. In course of this memorable lecture, he discredited the law of heredity and quoted instances to show that children were born with mental characteristics which they did not inherit from their parents or ancestors, saying, Mozart could play the piano when he was a baby. At 4 years of age, he composed music. At 8, he wrote an opera. This influence shows that the soul of an advanced musician was born in Mozart. He concluded by remarking that reincarnation was in harmony with the laws of evolution. Another interesting lecture he was invited to deliver during the first year of the new century was on the Jesus of history and tradition. Commenting on the speech he gave, the Boston Evening Transcript wrote, Swami Abhedananda, who attended the 84th Annual Convention, or 34th, and the Festival of the Free Religious Association of America was held at Boston Museum and was presided over by Dr. Louis James, president of the association, which gave a very interesting lecture. It was a large gathering, and thoughtful addresses of eminent speakers graced the occasion. Swami Abhedananda was of the opinion that Christ taught no new religion. It was the Persian conception of religion that Jesus taught, as it had been taught by Buddha 2 centuries before Christ. The Buddhist missionaries preached in Palestine and made many converts. The result of their teachings have been described by the Josephins, while John the Baptist was plainly a Buddhist monk, for his ascetic life and teaching prove this. The fundamental life of Jesus was founded on the principles taught by the Buddha, and his ethical teachings were purity, self-control, brotherhood, meekness, and love, such as had been practiced for centuries by the Hindus. Thus, it will be evident from many of his lectures that Swami Abhedananda, with his vast erudition and culture, was able to impress the American mind in a way which is unparalleled. The following extract, taken from an editorial article under the caption, An Evangel of the Orient, in the San Francisco Evening News of 1st August 1901, appears to be a glowing tribute to the genius of Abhedananda as the Hindu preacher in America. A pundit of unusual erudition and culture is with us in the person of Swami Abhedananda, who arrived from New York last Monday after a pleasant trip across the continent. The Swami is reported to be a very wise man. He is reported to speak in epigrams, a sample of which is offered in the sentence, "Everything comes in time. Exercise patience." It has been hinted that Swami Abhedananda has come preaching in the Occidental wilderness and that he intends to proselytize all who are awake to the light that dawns eternally in the East. If the Swami Abhedananda comes to teach us the doctrines of brotherly love, he will find us fellows plowed but unseeded. Perhaps the Swami has a few sacks of the seed of brotherly love in his doctrinal luggage. Let him scatter the seed. Some of it may fall on fertile ground. Much of it will necessarily be washed on barren places. But the Swami will not be discouraged. He will have pity on us and will understand that we have been so long out of the light that shines in the East, groping in shadows. Our vision has become dim and our understanding dull. Ye will know that our hearts have never been properly attained to the divine harmonies that sweep from the great heart of the universe. The Swami will know this, and by knowing, he will forgive. There are many things which the Swami will find in need of radical reform. He will find us steeped in sordid commercialism, greedy for empires, eager to profit at the cost of our fellow men. Even though women and children of the nation may cry for bread and shiver naked in the dissolute highways, he will find us welded to forms with fasting conventions and countless vanities. It is his purpose to lift us away from these mere human interests into the high light of Buddha's continents. We hope that he will succeed. We have lost hope and faith in our own selves, and we are yearning for the power of some glad evangelical angel who can turn us from the brutal highway of selfishness into the right way of righteousness. This is a clear indication of the American mind at the turn of the century and the subsequent activities of Swami Abhedananda, who is looking upon as the prophet and an angel of light and hope, has tarnished the American people from the path of selfishness to the highway of righteousness. The story of his preaching is, in fact, the history of the upliftment of the New World by the invasion of Vedanta, an invasion that has been seldom witnessed anywhere in the world.